Hey, good morning, everyone. Josh with Severe Weather. Happy Tuesday to you. Hope you are doing well. We are going to continue to talk here about Hurricane Nigel and then a new evolving threat here off the southeast coast late this week, which is, while it may get a name, is going to be more of a problem when it comes to rain here over the next several days. So enjoy the beautiful weather that we've got here coming in the eastern United States for a couple more days. We are going to see moisture from Florida gathering off the east coast and heading northward. And so I'm going to get to the details on that here in just a little bit. Here is the projected low pressure area, which will probably, I say probably, there's a good chance. I don't know if, I mean, I don't make the call in the end here, but we could have enough of a system to be classified as a subtropical storm. And the next name on the list is Ophelia, and that is expected to form east of Florida here at the end of the week and track slowly northward, making landfall, if you want to call it that, here over the weekend here in the Carolinas, and all that moisture is heading back up the East Coast. So we're still dealing with nasty rain this morning here in northern New England. Unfortunately, you only get a few days to catch your breath before more comes here over the weekend. So let's take a look at that. That is our area of yellow right now, a low chance of tropical formation, 30%, but nonetheless, low pressure will form. So it's not that we're not going to see a storm moving northward. It's just that we may not get a name out of it. And we could go back and forth on that part. But either way, it's going to be windy. It's going to be cool. It's going to be wet, kind of reminding us a little bit of what that weather was back on Memorial Day weekend. Those of you who tried to get to the beach did not enjoy that. This one, unfortunately, looks like kind of a similar setup if you look at it that way, although the waters are warmer now. So there may be a better chance that this system begins to unlatch itself from the front that's going to be hanging down in Florida and become something a little bit tropical here. So we do have Hurricane Nigel over the central Atlantic, no threat to land and not strengthening quite as quickly as maybe it looked like it might. And then another wave set to move off of Africa, which some models are now showing as a tropical depression, not as many as before though. So we may start to see some quieter weather in the tropics after this next wave moves out off of Africa. Here is a look at the tropics. This is the water vapor imagery from tropicaltidbits.com. Great site. I urge you to go visit it and support it if you are really into the weather. But here I'm going to circle all the players on the map. This is Hurricane Nigel, and you'll see it's got a massive eye with it, which is actually a sign that we have a system which maybe isn't going to strengthen quite as quickly. Some dry air getting into that circulation center, which was not really predicted here a few days ago. So maybe some better news here. But the good news is that Bermuda is right here, and Nigel is now starting to make the turn away from Bermuda and off into the northern latitudes. We do have a front that's hanging out here across south central Florida and off the east coast. Big low pressure circulation still moving around Maine into the Atlantic Maritimes, or into the Canadian Maritimes, and that is going to continue to bring some very heavy rain to parts of eastern Maine this morning, and certainly Atlantic Canada over the next few days. And then another storm system back here over the plains heading east, and we're likely going to see some severe weather across this region here late this afternoon and into the night tonight. Now, the Caribbean is still pretty quiet. The Gulf overall pretty quiet. This front not expected to develop anything tropically on this side. Although as we get into the late week, this is the area we're going to be watching for low pressure to move in this general direction here, maybe towards Myrtle Beach, Calabash, or Southport. We do have a monsoon trough here, ITCZ, Intertropical Convergence Zone. Nothing really organizing out of this, just a lot of rain and thunderstorms. We typically don't see development south of 10 north here. So these are likely just going to get sheared over this part of the area. But we do have this wave heading off of Africa that has come in a couple of pieces, but models are kind of downtrending on this development coming here. So the area is red, but it's not 100%, and I don't necessarily think it will try to develop yet. So what does form over here could snatch that O name, Ophelia, and then the next name on the list would be Philippe. And while we have 70% chance that this system here becomes that Philippe system, I'm starting to see that 70% kind of drop down and maybe closer to 50% by the time we get to Friday or Saturday. Either way, I don't think it's something we need to really stress too much about, but I'm still going to talk about it because the tropics are kind of my specialty here. Here's a look at the Western Atlantic. Here's Bermuda sitting pretty right now. Big eye here has developed in the last 12 hours with Hurricane Nigel. And because we have that big eye, we have more dry air getting into there. So I don't think it's going to strengthen as quickly as it looked like it was going to try to here a couple of days ago. And that's some good news, of course. Major hurricane looking less likely. Category 1 to 2 is what I think we're looking at today. But you can see the storm is going to start making a right turn here and that is obviously very good news here. Here's a look at the latest visible satellite. You can see an open eye here. Let me stop this because it's just getting light out. And you can see here on the northwestern eye wall some very intense storms nonetheless, but then there's some dry air getting in just north and west of that. So I think the likelihood of this going beyond category 2 at this point is actually very low. There's still a chance it could make a rally here tonight, tomorrow morning. I think that's going to be our one window for that to happen. But nonetheless, it's a fish storm. We're not going to lie about that part for you. And it should be weakening by the time we get on into Wednesday night and Thursday over cooler waters. It's running out of the really warm bath water that it's been in. A lot of the waters around Bermuda are cooler than they are this time of the year, typically due to the fact that we had Franklin and Lee pass through these waters. Even Adalia, those ate up a lot of that warm water. And so we are seeing less of a possibility of strengthening. The track forecast looks great here. Not going to be a threat to anybody in the next few days. And then the intensity forecast, the ship is backing down on the percentage chance that this rapidly intensifies. And I personally don't think that that happens. Wind shear is still low for 24 hours, but look at the relative humidity. The projected humidity drops below 50% here in the mid levels of the atmosphere, and that is not favorable for a developing storm. And the heat content drops off as well. So this thing may actually be almost done strengthening. And the ship's model says it's not going to rapidly intensify anymore. It's probably just going to stay at category 1. So we may be a little bit too aggressive with category 2. A few models show it, but more show 1 than 2 at this point. I don't really think we're going to get to category 3, but I wouldn't be shocked if it tried to make one last run towards that. But right now, just not looking favorable. The rest of the Eastern Atlantic right now, nothing looking really too likely to organize. I mean, I know we've been tracking this wave getting ready to come off of Africa, but continuity says let's keep it a high chance, but I think that chance is starting to dwindle a little bit. Now, when it gets farther west towards 45, we need to keep an eye on it, but I think we've got a little bit too much wind shear here. You can kind of see these winds out of the southwest here around this kind of upper level low here. We've got a pretty good amount of southwesterly wind shear here, and that's going to be very unfavorable for any of this to develop it here. Now, as this upper low pulls away, and this wave comes off, it may start to become more robust, but I don't think that happens until it gets into this area here later this weekend and really not until next week. So if we do get a storm off the East Coast, I think that one's going to snatch the name Ophelia, and this one would have to wait to be Philippe, which I know there's a Hurricane Center forecaster named Philippe Papin, and he'll be excited to see his name being used. So anyway, here's a look at the GFS model from earlier today, and you can see our storm Nigel making the right turn here. We've got our non-tropical storm moving through Atlantic Canada today, and then really nothing behind it for a while. As we get towards Friday morning, we do see lower pressure here east of Daytona Beach, north of the Northwest Bahamas, and then a massive area of high pressure blocking over New England. Now that high is going to slide east and allow moisture to spread northward here by the weekend, and you can see low pressure tracking northward. This particular run, the GFS says the Cape Fear, or I'm sorry, the Cape Lookout area actually would see the landfall and then the weakening low pressure, and then it kind of falls apart here by the end of the weekend, but we will still have kind of some onshore flow here next week. Now you'll see out in the Atlantic, we try to see something develop here, but the GFS is not super bullish on it, and in fact is kind of less and less with each run here of that probability of formation. And this is kind of the shutdown of the Cape Verde season I've been expecting here towards the end of the month of September. So it is possible we do see one more storm out of it, but I think that's really going to be it. Then I think our area has to shift towards areas closer to the U.S. and towards Central America and the Western Caribbean for development in October. But again, we don't want to try to get too detailed with that. It's a little too far in the future. Here's a look at the European control. Low pressure forming off the South Carolina coast. Remember, the GFS had this coming up towards Morehead City. The European control says it's going to hit near Pawleys Island and Murrells Inlet here, south of Myrtle Beach. It does show a weaker system here over the end of the weekend, early next week, tracking and then eventually making a right turn, getting caught up here in this larger circulation. So if something does form, I don't think it's really going to be a threat to land at this point. It's going to maybe have more of a future, kind of like what we saw with Margot, where something forms and dawdles around here for a week or so and just scares the fishes, but really that's about it. Excuse me. So I'm being hopeful in that it's not going to be a big deal at this point. The operational European does not really show much development here before the weekend. It shows maybe a weak system here Friday night, Saturday morning. Here's our area to watch off the southeast coast. This is early in the day on Saturday, tracking northward towards Myrtle Beach Saturday night, then moving into North Carolina and falling apart by the time we get to Sunday morning or so. Here's our next system here, and you can see again, it's probably going to make a right turn as this big high builds in here next week. And I don't think it's going to be anything major. There's only one model that still shows that happening, and that's the Canadian model, which is not always the best tropical model to even trust, but it does show some development here. I think it's too strong with our southeastern coastal storm here that comes up towards Southport and Wilmington. It's got it as a stronger tropical storm, but hey, we can't really rule that out at this point. Here's our next system, by the way. It does develop it into a low-end tropical storm here on Saturday and tracks it west-northwest, still not really strengthening until we get towards Tuesday or Wednesday. So it kind of misses this front here and has a chance to maybe grow a little bit according to the Canadian model here. So it does show a hurricane still. I think that's why we've got that red area, 70%, but it still takes a while before that happens. Probably not until about this time next week. And you can see this system is already starting to turn away to the right and should stay off to the south and east of Bermuda. I say should because as long as we've got these big high pressure systems building in, we still have uncertain steering mechanisms. So let's look at the tropics. Really not much more to talk about, but let's take a look here at the eastern seaboard here over the next few days. One system moving away from Maine this morning, still wet across New Brunswick. Our next system is gathering some gradual strength here across the east coast of Florida. A lot of rain coming for central and south Florida. Our low pressure area should start to generate by the time we get late into Thursday night, early Friday morning. And you can see a lot of moisture out ahead of it here. We've got kind of a retreating front, kind of a coastal boundary. And that's going to bring heavy rain inland here by the time we already get into Friday morning. So it'll already be raining pretty hard in the Outer Banks and eastern Virginia during the day on Friday, and then spreading up into the Mid-Atlantic region Friday night and then into the Northeast on Saturday morning. How far north this moisture gets is going to be very uncertain until we know exactly how strong this high building down is. This brings drier air down, so northern New England may actually escape the big rains, but southern New England into the Mid-Atlantic, that includes Philly, New York City, Baltimore, D.C., could all be looking at significant rain over the weekend as this low kind of gets trapped. And then behind it, we've got more moisture coming up here, the East Coast, and a non-tropical low, which may be aimed at southern New England by the time we get into Wednesday and Thursday. So if you're in southern New England and Long Island and upstate New York, northern New Jersey, northeast PA, you really need to be mindful of the amount of rain that we could potentially be dealing with here starting this weekend, but continuing on into the next week. We could be talking about significant amounts of rain and potential flooding again across this region. So a very busy setup coming once again. Here's a closer view of the East Coast, and this is zoomed in on the Mid-Atlantic. You can see rain spreads into the Carolinas Friday morning. Gets heavier Friday afternoon into Friday night, moves up the East Coast into New Jersey. Very wet Saturday morning across this region. Not going to be good for any college football games across the area. And we see more rain across North Carolina right through Saturday night into early Sunday, and then gradually drying out south of Virginia, but staying pretty damp and pretty dreary here across the Mid-Atlantic. Kind of a cold air wedge here setting up. So it's going to be a cool, wet start to next week, and then our next wave of low pressure comes up here. So not looking pretty. Total rain amounts here are going to be pretty significant if this particular model run is correct. We are talking amounts that are going to get over 2 inches here across the Grand Strand, over 3 inches, and maybe as high as 6 or 7 across the Outer Banks, 4 inches in Virginia Beach, 5 across the Delmarva, Eastern Shore of Maryland, 3 around Baltimore, 5, 6, 7 inches over the Philly area, South Jersey, 3 inches or more across Long Island and southern Connecticut and southern Rhode Island and southeastern Massachusetts. So we very well could be dealing with flash flooding out of this by the time we get into Saturday night and Sunday morning. Here's a look at a wind forecast from the Canadian model. It's showing some gusty winds moving into the Carolinas, generally around 40 miles per hour at the beaches, 30 miles per hour inland, 30 to 40 miles per hour as well at the mouth of the Chesapeake, and over 50 miles per hour across the Outer Banks. So a very windy weekend expected, especially on Saturday. And then farther up the East Coast, we are going to start to see these winds as the pressure gradient tightens up ahead of our storm on Saturday morning. Wind gusts could get up to 40 miles per hour in places like Atlantic City or Rehoboth Beach or even the south coast of Long Island, and 30 to 40 miles per hour here across Cape Cod and those areas. So the wind this weekend is going to make up for what we kind of missed out on with Lee across the northeastern coastline, except for eastern parts of New England. So a very nasty week setting up here when it comes to wind. Let's also talk about severe weather back in the plains. Hate to jump around on you guys, but this is important. We are going to see some significant severe weather potential here as we get into the evening hours across North Texas and much of Oklahoma, even into far southern Kansas, and a marginal risk across this area again tomorrow. We could have some hail and strong winds. As we get into Thursday, we continue to see active weather. It spreads north and east into the Great Lakes, but more severe weather potential over Nebraska, Kansas, and Oklahoma during the day on Thursday. And we also have a chance on Friday for some severe weather across parts of eastern and central Nebraska, southeastern South Dakota, Omaha, maybe Council Bluffs in Iowa, and northern portions of Kansas on Friday. And that will continue to build north and east on Saturday. Here's a look today at our best chance for severe weather. I think there could be a few tornadoes. You see kind of this 2% here. Norman, Oklahoma City on northward, but the bigger threat, I think, will be wind and especially gorilla hail, very large hail, maybe 2 or 3 inches in diameter from just west of Fort Worth. So places like Ranger and Cisco up to Wichita Falls, Lawton, Ardmore, Norman, Oklahoma City, back to Enid, Woodward. Really all of west central parts of Oklahoma could see some rough hail here, especially this evening. And tomorrow, we continue to see the threat for severe weather, albeit a lesser chance, but we do have a chance for a few tornadoes on the northern side of the Metroplex towards Frisco, towards McKinney, towards Gainesville, Texas, Ardmore, all the way up to Oklahoma City and Stillwater in Oklahoma for the day tomorrow. And more potential severe weather on Thursday and then lifting north on Friday. Here's a look at why. We've got an active jet here. You see kind of a trough, a little bit of a feature here with faster wind flow aloft moving across Oklahoma. We've not seen these kinds of winds since June and early July. We've just had this death ridge in place, and now some troughing finally cutting down here on the heat, but also bringing faster wind flow aloft. And doesn't look like a lot of wind at this point, but there's colder air aloft that could certainly trigger some pretty big hail. But as we get into the next system here on Thursday, we see a stronger, more robust trough dropping down into the southwest, bringing faster wind flow aloft into Arizona and New Mexico. And those higher winds are going to advance Thursday night and Friday into 2 areas, one across Oklahoma and the other across western Kansas and Nebraska. And it certainly looks like an active weekend here across this entire region here as the upper low lifts northward up into Montana. I'll break down more details later this week, but here's a look at the supercell composite heading into this evening, and it's moderately high here across Oklahoma. And then it builds right back tomorrow across eastern and central Oklahoma, southern Kansas, and northeastern Nebraska. And then more severe weather expected Thursday. And look at Friday night. It looks very active from North Texas up into Nebraska. We are likely going to see some supercells. And then Saturday over kind of the same areas, a little farther east than Friday, but certainly could be active on the I-35 corridor here. And even Sunday could be a little bit busy here across parts of Oklahoma and Kansas. So several days of severe weather. That'll get the storm chasers out there. I know they've been kind of in a dead period, but also very dangerous weather, very large hail potential, and maybe a few tornadoes as well. The high resolution NAM kind of shows how things evolve here. We are going to see rain this morning, but more active weather later on this afternoon over Oklahoma. And then here come the supercells, and I'll zoom in to show this to you guys in a little bit. Some bigger storm cells expected here tonight across Oklahoma. The kind of storms you want to make sure you have multiple ways of receiving warnings from. And then those lift away, and we see additional development tomorrow afternoon into the evening. Probably not as much as tonight, but certainly there's that chance to see that development. The NAM, though, is not super gung-ho on that happening. Here's a closer look at Oklahoma, and you guys can see here things are going to get pretty busy towards the end of the afternoon here. From Tulsa down that's just south of Moore and Norman all the way back to near Lawton. And then here come the storms, places like Childress, Texas, building up towards Elk City, Lawton, Wichita Falls. This is where our area of biggest hail and a few tornadoes looks to be higher late this afternoon into the evening hours, your prime time for severe weather. And then things will gradually move away by tomorrow morning. We get a break, and then we could see additional storms popping up here, which I don't think the NAM is going to do a great job handling based on the other models. So anyway, I went too long today, and I apologize for that. But if you're still with me, thank you so much for watching. Please consider subscribing to my channel. It helps support me and my reach. I also have a membership option if you want to become a member, if you feel led to. No pressure, of course. $9.99 a month. That helps me out and gives me the ability to interact with people like you on a more frequent basis. But again, it's not about the money making. It's just the ability for me to bless other people. I feel like that's my calling, and I give all the glory to God every day because I am a Christian man. And while I happen to be a meteorologist. That doesn't define who I am. Who I am is a sinner and, and somebody who God has forgiven through the fact that I've accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior. And you know what? Doing a good job here doesn't even come close to knowing the job that's already been done for me eternally, and that's that I can live eternally with Jesus in heaven one day. And I pray that that is your case as well. I accepted Christ in 2013. I was a meteorologist then. I thought I was a great meteorologist, but I was lacking quite a bit in the rest of my life. Not doing very well in my relationships, feeling very troubled as a younger adult, feeling like I just had no hope. But thank God the door opened up for me to learn more about God and more about Jesus, and finally realize that there is a bigger plan and I'm a part of something a lot bigger. And I just want to share that good news with you guys. Psalm 46 says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore will not we fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, through the mountains shake with the swelling thereof. There is a water, the streams whereof shall make glad the city of God, the holy place of the tabernacles of the Most High. That is the city of dreams, folks. That is our hope, that we can one day live with God eternally and not stress about what's going to happen to us when our time here on earth, and it's not a very long time, but when that time is gone. So if you are troubled, if you are dealing with difficulties in your life, maybe you're even too proud to admit it, and that's okay, because I was for a very long time, just know that God is our refuge and our strength. We should not fear the future because God is here with us. Jesus is coming again, and he is the light for us in a very dark, troubling world. The weather here is very bad sometimes. Hurricanes are damaging, tornadoes, everything has been rough. A lot of us have had to rebuild our lives around rough weather, but know that that also gives us the opportunity maybe just to be still for a moment and realize that all of our material possessions, while important to us, while it's comforting to have a roof over our heads and to have some health and some life, it doesn't matter in the end, folks. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is that Jesus Christ has risen from the dead so that we can be with him eternally. I want to pray for you and with you because I think that that is personally something that is often overlooked. And just know that whatever your religious beliefs are, and you may not be a Christian or even a believer, I'm not here to judge you. And I'm not even preaching to you. I'm just sharing what's important to me because it's my channel and I feel like I can do that. And that's my calling. So I would love to pray for you or over you or anyone in your life that is important to you. And I hope that you get a chance to spend some time in prayer. And if you'd like to, please pray for me as well if you feel led to. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day. We'll chat again tomorrow morning. Have a blessed day. See you then.